She lived in a very small village at the edge of a wide green land. The houses were old and made of stone, and the roads were dusty most of the year. People there lived simple lives. They woke up early, worked hard, and slept early. In that village, everyone knew each other's stories, yet no one truly cared to listen. Among all those people, there was one young woman who barely existed in their eyes. She was quiet, always keeping her head down when she walked. Her clothes were clean but old, carefully stitched again and again by her own hands. She worked for others, helping in homes, washing floors, carrying water, cooking simple meals. People rarely called her by her real name. Behind her back, they mocked her and gave her cruel labels. They compared her to a beetle, small, dark, and easy to crush. They said she was invisible, unwanted, and born unlucky. She heard those words more times than she could remember. At first, they hurt deeply. Over time, they became heavy stones she carried inside her chest. Still, she never replied with anger. She believed silence was safer than fighting, and kindness was warmer than hate. When people laughed, she kept walking. When they ignored her, she continued her work. She believed life must have a reason for her pain, even if she could not see it yet. Her life followed the same routine each day. Before sunrise, she would fetch water from the well. She would feed the chickens for a family that barely looked at her face. In the evenings, she would sit alone by the small window of her room and watch the sky slowly change colors. The sky was the only place where she felt free. No one judged the clouds for their shape or the stars for their brightness. She wished humans could be like that too. Not far from that village stood a grand world made of stone walls, shining roofs, and tall gates. This was where the prince lived. His home was large enough to feel like a separate city. Everything around him sparkled with wealth and comfort. Guards stood alert, servants moved quickly, and advisors whispered plans and worries all day long. The prince was admired by many and envied by more. People spoke of his looks, his sharp mind, and his future rule. Yet behind the fine clothes and confident stance, he carried his own form of loneliness. From a young age, he had been taught to stand tall, speak less, and trust no one easily. His life was carefully designed by duty rather than desire. He woke up every morning knowing his choices were never truly his own. What he wore, what he learned, who he met, and who he would one day marry all were decided long before he had a voice. Smiles surrounded him, but honesty rarely did. Compliments filled the halls, but love felt far away. One afternoon, he decided to ride outside the palace walls. It was rare, but he needed the quiet. The air beyond the gates felt lighter. His horse moved slowly through open fields and narrow roads that led close to the village. The prince had no plan, only a wish to escape the noise of expectations. At the same time, the young woman was carrying a basket of herbs she had gathered. Her hands were scratched from thorns, and her feet ached after walking so long. Her thoughts were elsewhere, lost in the quiet comfort of nature. She did not hear the horse approaching. The meeting happened suddenly. The horse stopped just in time, its hooves scraping the ground. The young woman stumbled back, surprised, nearly dropping her basket. She froze, eyes wide, as she realized who stood before her. The prince looked down at her, his face calm but distant. To him, she was just another villager, small, nervous, dressed in plain colors. Someone who belonged far from his world. He spoke briefly, asking if she was hurt. His tone was polite, yet cold. Like a rule he had memorized, she quickly shook her head and apologized, though it was not her fault. Her voice was soft, almost swallowed by the wind. She bent down to gather the herbs that had spilled, not daring to meet his eyes for long. He watched her for a moment longer than he intended. Something about her silence felt different. She did not ask for help or favor. She did not try to impress him. After a pause, he nodded and rode away, his thoughts already moving on, to him. It was nothing more than a small interruption. To her, it was a moment that would echo in her thoughts for days. Not because he was royal, but because he had looked at her without mockery. He did not laugh, did not insult, did not push her aside. That alone felt unusual, almost kind, that night. The prince returned to his palace, but the quiet he had searched for did not follow him inside. For reasons he could not explain, his mind briefly returned to the girl on the road. He brushed the thought away, reminding himself she was part of a world he did not belong to. Days passed, and life returned to its usual rhythm. Yet fate had its own plans. A public event was announced near the village, one that required workers from many nearby places. The young woman was chosen to help, along with several others. She felt both nervous and hopeful. New places scared her, but they also meant change. She was assigned simple tasks: cleaning, arranging supplies, carrying messages. People still ignored her, still spoke over her head, but she did her work carefully, as she always did. On the second day of the event, she found herself near a shaded area where important guests rested. She lowered her gaze as she passed, just as she always did. That was when she noticed familiar shoes, polished and expensive. Her heart skipped. He was there. The prince stood speaking with others, his posture straight, his expression thoughtful. He did not notice her at first. She moved quietly, hoping to pass unseen. But when she stumbled slightly on uneven ground, the sound caught his attention. Their eyes met again. This time he recognized her. The girl from the road. His brows tightened slightly as if surprised by the coincidence. For a brief moment, neither spoke. People moved around them, unaware of the silent pause. He gave a slight nod, more curious now than distant. She returned the gesture, her hands trembling as she continued her task. To others, it meant nothing. To both of them, it felt like the world had quietly shifted. As she walked away, the prince watched longer than he should have. There was still no beauty that caught the eye, no elegance taught by palaces. But there was something else, something calm, steady, and real. He could not name it, but it stayed with him. And the young woman, often called a Beetle, carried a strange warmth in her chest as she worked. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen, not admired, not pitied, just seen. Neither of them knew it yet, but their worlds had begun to lean toward each other. Slowly, quietly, like fate taking its first careful step after the public event ended. Life slowly slipped back into its usual rhythm. The palace returned to its silence filled with rules, and the village returned to its dust and routine. Yet something had changed, quietly and deeply, for both of them. For the young woman, the days felt heavier than before. Not because people treated her worse they always had, but because her thoughts wandered more often now. While washing floors or carrying water, she would suddenly remember the way the prince had looked at her. Not with love or warmth, but with curiosity. That look stayed in her mind like a question that had no answer. She scolded herself for thinking about it. She reminded herself of her place. A girl like her did not belong in stories with princes. Those stories were for others, the beautiful ones, the lucky ones. Still, the heart does not always listen to reason. Each night, she sat by her window and watched the sky. She wondered what it must feel like to live without fear of tomorrow, to be respected the moment you enter a room. She wondered if the prince ever felt lonely in all his comfort. The thought surprised her, and she shook her head as if to chase it away. Inside the palace, the prince found it harder than usual to focus. Meetings blurred together, voices sounding distant. His advisors spoke of alliances, duties, and the future, but his thoughts kept returning to small, unimportant moments. The quiet girl, her calm eyes, the way she never tried to prove herself. He told himself it meant nothing. She was just different from the many people who surrounded him. Everyone near him wanted something: praise, power, favor. She had wanted nothing at all. Days later, he found himself riding near the village once again. He told his guard it was for inspection, but deep down, he knew it was not. The roads felt familiar now. The smell of earth and grass brought him a strange comfort. He saw her near the well, pulling up a heavy bucket of water. Her arms trembled with effort. No one helped her. People passed by as if she were part of the ground itself. He stopped a short distance away. Unseen. She rested for a moment, catching her breath. A small sigh escaped her lips, Then she smiled to herself for no clear reason. It was not a grand smile. It was quiet, tired, but real. That was when something shifted inside him. Without thinking too much, he stepped forward. The sound of his boots caught her attention. She turned, startled, almost dropping the bucket. Seeing him again made her heart race. She lowered her head quickly, unsure of what to do. He spoke gently, asking if the bucket was too heavy. The question itself surprised him. He had never worried about such small struggles before. She shook her head softly, saying she was used to it. Her voice was calm, not bitter. A pause followed. The well creaked. The village noise continued around them. He offered to help. She looked up then, shock clear on her face. No one had made such an offer to her in a long time. Before she could refuse, he lifted the bucket with ease and placed it beside her. People nearby stopped and stared. Whispers spread like fire through dry grass. She felt their eyes burning into her back. Embarrassment rushed through her. She thanked him quickly and reached for the bucket, eager to leave. But he asked her name. She hesitated. Names held power. They carried identity, and she had learned that sharing hers often brought ridicule. Still, she answered. He repeated it quietly, as if testing how it sounded. For the first time, she noticed how tired he looked up close. Not physically, but in his eyes. There was weight there, hidden behind calm confidence. Their conversation was short and awkward. He asked where she worked. She answered honestly. No lies, no attempts to appear better than she was. Then he left, leaving behind confusion, warmth, and an entire village buzzing with shock. That evening, cruel words followed her home. People mocked her openly now, accusing her of trying to rise above her place. Some laughed. Some warned her not to dream. She said nothing. In her small room, she sat in the dark longer than usual. Tears came quietly. Not because of the insults, they were familiar, but because part of her had dared to hope. Hope felt dangerous. Meanwhile, the prince faced questions of his own. His guards spoke in low voices. Rumors reached the advisors. They reminded him of appearances, of distance, of what was proper. He listened, expression unreadable. Inside, however, something resisted their warnings. Helping her had felt right. Over the next weeks, their encounters became rare but meaningful. A brief exchange of words at the market. A shared silence near the road. Each time, the distance between them shrank slightly. He began to notice how people treated her, how she was spoken over, ignored, blamed for things she did not do. It unsettled him. One day, he saw a merchant shout at her unfairly. Without thinking, he intervened. His authority silenced the man instantly. She thanked him later, her eyes shining not with gratitude but with worry. His protection made her stand out even more in that. Frightened her. She tried to avoid him after that, he noticed. The absence bothered him more than he expected. He missed her quiet presence, her honesty. He wondered if he had caused her harm rather than help. When they finally spoke again, she explained softly that attention was not always a blessing for someone like her. Her words stayed with him. That night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling. For the first time, he questioned the simple truth he had always believed, that power fixed everything, and far away in her small room, she whispered a promise to herself. No matter how her heart felt, she would not let herself become weak for a dream. It was never meant for her. Yet destiny has a way of touching people even when they look away. Unseen by both of them. The world was already shifting. Small choices were adding up. Glances became thoughts. Thoughts became feelings. The beetle and the prince were walking toward something neither was ready to name, but neither could truly escape. Time moved forward, but nothing felt simple anymore. What once seemed like small moments had now grown. Heavy with meaning, the young woman tried her best to return to the life she knew. She woke before sunrise, worked until her body ached, and spoke as little as possible. From the outside, nothing had changed. Inside her, everything had. She found herself listening for footsteps that were not meant for her. When she passed the road near the fields, Her eyes searched without permission from her heart. She hated herself for it. Hope had always hurt her more than pain. People in the village noticed her silence grow deeper. Some said she had become proud. Others said she was foolish to dream. She heard it all, lowered her head, and kept moving. One afternoon, while carrying supplies for a household near the edge of the land, she heard raised voices. A group of workers were arguing. Their anger did not belong to her, but it reached her anyway. A mistake had been made during construction near the palace grounds. Something costly was damaged. Someone needed to be blamed. She arrived just in time to hear her name spoken. The accusation hit her like cold water. She stood frozen as fingers pointed her way. They said she had passed through the area earlier. They said she was careless, clumsy, and always in the way. She tried to speak, but words failed her. Fear tightened her chest. She was used to unfairness, but this could cost her everything. Work was survival. Voices grew louder. No one listened to her quiet denial. Then a familiar voice cut through the noise. The prince stepped forward. His presence alone silenced the crowd. He had seen enough to know the truth. Calmly, clearly, he explained what had really happened. Others confirmed his words. The blame lifted from her shoulders. Relief nearly weakened her knees. But relief quickly turned into something else. Attention. All eyes turned toward her. Whispers grew sharper. Some looked at her with suspicion, others with envy. She wanted to disappear. Later that day, she thanked the prince privately. Her voice trembled not from gratitude, but from fear of the trouble his defense might bring her. He noticed she told him the truth she had never spoken aloud. Standing too close to power, she said, often burned people like her. His kindness, though well-meant, made her life harder. For the first time, had no answer. That night, the prince faced anger within the palace walls. Advisors warned him sternly. Guards spoke of rumors spreading fast. They reminded him of his position and the damage such attention could cause. He felt torn between two truths, what was expected of him, and what felt right. Away from the palace, the young woman packed her few belongings. Fear told her to leave before things grew worse. She had done it before, many times. But as she held her worn clothes, exhaustion washed over her. Running had never truly saved her. It only delayed the pain. She stayed. Days passed, tense and uncertain. The prince did not seek her out. She told herself it was for the best. Distance was safer for both of them, yet fate refused to give them peace. A violent storm arrived without warning. Heavy rain flooded roads and strong winds damaged parts of the village. Panic spread. Homes were threatened. Supplies were lost. The prince was among the first to organize help. Orders were given quickly. Food, shelter, and care were arranged. In the chaos, he saw her again. She moved through the storm without hesitation, helping elderly villagers, guiding children, carrying what she could. The rain soaked her clothes, mud stained her hands, but she did not stop. Watching her, something inside him shifted forever. She was not weak. She was strong in ways no crown could teach. When a child nearly slipped into rushing water, she reached without thinking. The effort threw her hard against the ground. Pain shot through her leg. The prince saw it happen. He ran to her side, assisting her as guards rushed in. She tried to stand and failed. Embarrassment burned her cheeks more than pain. He insisted she rest. She protested weakly. Too many depended on her. He looked at her then, really looked. Not as a villager, not as a rumor, but as a person. Let others help now, he said quietly. Something about his voice broke through her defenses. She nodded. Sheltered from the storm, they sat in silence. Rain hammered the ground around them. For the first time, she spoke of her life. Not in full detail, but enough. The years of being overlooked. The names people called her. The belief that she was meant to stay invisible. He listened without interruption. When she finished, he said something that stunned her. He told her she saw herself through the eyes of people who did not deserve to define her. The words stayed with her. When the storm finally passed, the village lay tired but standing. Recovery would take time, but lives were safe. As she prepared to leave the shelter, she thanked him again. This time, the thanks felt different. Less fearful, more honest. He wanted to say more, wanted to promise protection, presence, something greater, but duty stood between them, tall and unyielding. As she walked away limping slightly, he felt a fear he had never known before, the fear of losing someone before he had truly found them. And the young woman, it's often called a beetle, carried with her a seed that refused to die, the fragile belief that perhaps she had never been small at all. Both stood at the edge of change, unsure whether courage or fear would decide what came next. After the storm, nothing returned to normal. The village was quieter, heavier, as if everyone could feel that something important was slowly unfolding. Paths were repaired, walls rebuilt, but hearts stayed unsettled. The young woman's leg healed slowly. She continued working, though each step reminded her of the storm. People spoke to her differently now. Some with forced kindness, others with hidden resentment. They no longer ignored her, and strangely, that hurt more than being unseen. Rumors followed her like a shadow. Some said she was trying to rise above her place. Others whispered that she had caught the prince's attention on purpose. She heard it all, even when she pretended not to. She reminded herself daily that the prince's world was not hers. Whatever moments they had shared were shaped by circumstance, not promise. Holding on would only bring pain. Inside the palace, pressure tightened. The prince was called into long meetings. Advisors spoke carefully, but their meaning was clear. His closeness to a simple village worker had become talk beyond the gates. Allies questioned his judgment. Some warned that compassion, if shown carelessly, could become weakness. He listened, silent and controlled. Yet something inside him resisted their words. He had seen strength that no title could give. One night his chief advisor spoke plainly. A future match was being considered. Someone of status. Someone suitable. The words landed heavily. Marriage had always been duty, never desire. Yet now the thought felt like a quiet betrayal. Not to another woman, but to himself. Days passed. The prince did not visit the village. The young woman noticed immediately at first. She told herself it was for the best. Distance meant safety. But as time passed, the silence grew louder than words ever had. She felt foolish for expecting anything more. She focused on work, accepting extra tasks, tiring herself until thought became impossible. One evening, she was called to a nearby estate to help prepare for important guests. She knew what that meant. The prince would be there. Her hands shook as she worked behind the walls. She avoided the main hall, keeping her head low, but fate, once again, did not ask permission. They saw each other across the room. For a brief moment, the noise faded. The space between them felt heavy with everything unsaid. He looked different, tired, burdened. She forced herself to look away first. Later he found her outside, arranging supplies. Night air carried the scent of flowers and stone. He spoke her name softly. She turned slowly. Her expression was calm but guarded. He tried to explain. Not in long speeches. Just honesty. He spoke of responsibility, of pressure, of choices made without freedom. She listened carefully. Then she spoke. She told him she understood duty better than he might think. Life had given her little room for choice as well. But understanding did not erase pain. She told him that being close to him had changed how people treated her, that his kindness had made her visible in a way that hurt. Her voice did not accuse. It simply told the truth. That truth struck him harder than anger ever could. He asked her what she wanted. The question felt cruel in its kindness. Desire had never been something she allowed herself. After a long pause, she answered honestly. She wanted peace. A life where she did not feel like a mistake for existing. He had no promise that could give her. That silence sat between them, in that silence. A decision formed in her heart. The next morning, she left the village. No farewell. No announcement, just absence. When the prince learned she was gone, something broke inside him. He rode through the village searching, asking questions. Finding only confusion, she had returned to what she knew best, being invisible. Days turned restless. The palace felt colder than ever. He replayed her words again and again. He realized too late that his distance had been its own choice. A choice that hurt her more than any rumor. Meanwhile, she traveled from place to place, taking small work wherever she could. Each town was the same. New faces, old judgments, but something inside her had changed. She no longer believed the cruel names belonged to her. They were lies passed from mouth to mouth. She remembered his words during the storm, about not letting others define her at night, beneath unfamiliar skies. She wondered if courage meant leaving or staying and fighting far away. The prince stood before a future being shaped without his consent. Plans tightened. Expectations closed in. He realized love was not a soft thing. It demanded bravery, and for the first time in his life, he questioned whether following duty without truth was worth the crown at all. Two hearts moved through separate paths. Carrying the same ache, both stood at breaking points, and somewhere between loss and clarity. Destiny prepared its final test. Time passed, but the ache did not fade. It changed shape, growing quieter but deeper, like a wound covered yet never healed. The prince stood before halls filled with plans that did not include his heart. Advisors spoke, agreements were discussed, and futures were drawn on parchment as if lives were simple lines. He listened, nodded when needed, and said little. Inside, something steady had formed. He knew now that silence was also a choice, and he could no longer afford it. He began to ask questions that unsettled those around him. Why must duty ignore truth? Why should a crown weigh more than a human heart? The answers he received were old and practiced, but they no longer satisfied him. One evening after another closed meeting, he made a decision that surprised even himself. He ordered his horse and rode out without ceremony, without guards making a show of power. For once he wanted to move as a man, not as a title. He followed whispers, small rumors of a quiet young woman who worked hard, asked for little, and kept to herself. Town by town, he searched, listening more than he spoke, far away from the palace. The young woman had learned how to stand alone. Her journey was not easy. Some doors closed quickly when they saw her worn shoes and modest clothes. Others offered short kindness that faded fast. Still, she worked. She learned new skills, helped where she could, slowly built something she had never known before, self-respect. She no longer accepted insult in silence. When unfair words came, she corrected them calmly, not with anger. With truth at night, she thought of the prince less often, but when she did, the pain was softer. She did not regret leaving. She regretted that courage had come at the cost of connection. One late afternoon, she arranged supplies at a small roadside stop. She felt a presence behind her, a familiarity she could not explain. She turned. He stood there, dust on his boots, weariness in his eyes, and honesty in his posture. For a moment, neither moved. Then she spoke first, her voice steady. She asked what had brought him so far from home. He answered simply. He said he had been looking for her. The air between them felt heavy, but not painful. It was full, memories, mistakes, and understanding. He apologized. Not in excuses. Not in promises. He apologized for his distance, for choosing safety when courage was needed, for seeing too late the cost of silence. She listened. When he finished, she spoke too. She told him leaving had saved her, that finding herself had been necessary. But she also admitted the truth she had tried to bury, that she had cared deeply. Even when she pretended not to, there were no grand declarations. Just honesty. He told her he could not offer her a perfect world. His life remained complicated. Duty still existed, but he could offer something real, a choice for the first time. The choice was not shaped by fear on either side. She asked him one question. Would she always be expected to stay small, so his world stayed comfortable? He answered without hesitation. No. He said he had learned that love was not about lifting someone into your world, but about meeting them in a space where both could stand equally. Tears came to her eyes. Not from sorrow, but from release. They did not rush back together. They walked slowly, side by side, learning each other again without shadows. When the time came to return, they did so openly. The palace doors did not change overnight. Some welcomed her. Others judged silently. But this time, she did not enter with her head lowered. She spoke when needed. She listened when wise. She remained herself. The prince stood beside her, not in front, not behind. The whispers returned, but they mattered less now. Truth had a stronger voice. Over time, people noticed something rare. He ruled with understanding. She lived with quiet strength. They changed the world around them, not by force, by example. The girl once called a beetle had never needed to become something else. She had simply needed space to unfold. And the prince learned that a crown is light, and the heart beneath it is free. In the end, love did not transform them, it revealed them, and that was enough. Life did not slow down after love found its place. If anything, it became more real. The palace was still tall, its walls still heavy with history and rules. But something within it had shifted. People noticed it in small ways first. The prince walked more among the common people. He listened longer. He spoke less, but when he did, his words carried weight. The young woman moved through the palace grounds with careful steps. Not because she felt small, but because she respected herself too much to rush. She did not try to dress like others or behave in ways that were not her own. Her simplicity stayed with her, steady and honest. Some admired her quiet strength. Some resented it. Not everyone believed she belonged there. There were moments when whispers passed through halls, sharp enough to cut. People said she had risen too far, too fast. They questioned her worth, her background, her presence beside the prince. She heard them. The old version of her would have shrunk. This one did not. She reminded herself that survival had taught her more than comfort ever could. Still, strength did not mean immunity to pain. There were nights she sat alone, staring at the same sky she once watched through a cracked village window. The stars looked the same. It reminded her where she had come from. The prince noticed her silence and asked gently if she regretted returning. She told him the truth. Some days were harder than others. Being visible came with weight. But she did not regret choosing herself. That honesty only deepened his respect. Together, they began doing something no one expected. They worked not to impress, but to understand. They visited villages, listened to those who had never been heard, and asked questions without pretending they already knew the answers. Change did not come quickly, but it came honestly. Some resisted. Change always frightened those who benefited from stillness. One evening, a council gathered to discuss the future. Among polite words, a familiar tone surfaced. Concern, doubt. They spoke of tradition, of image, of what people expected. Then someone spoke openly. They said the prince risked losing respect by standing beside someone without rank. Silence followed. The prince rose calmly. He did not raise his voice. He did not defend with anger. He spoke of leadership not as power, but as responsibility. Of love, not as weakness, but as truth. He said, respect earned through fear was fragile, but respect built through fairness endured. When he finished, no one interrupted. The young woman watched from the side, her chest tight with emotion. No one had ever spoken for someone like her in such a place. Later, she thanked him quietly. He smiled and told her he had not spoken for her. He had spoken with her. That difference mattered. Outside the palace, word spread. Some called it foolishness. Others called it hope. Young girls began to walk differently, standing a little taller. Young men listened more carefully, and the woman once called a beetle noticed. Something she'd never expected. Her presence made room for others. She began helping quietly behind the scenes, teaching skills, sharing food, listening. She did not lead with titles, but with action. In doing so, she found a deeper purpose. Yet life tested them once more. A disagreement arose between neighboring regions. Tension grew. People looked to the prince for certainty. The pressure was heavy. That night, fear visited her old companion doubt. She wondered if standing beside him would cost him everything. She wondered if love required her to step back. She told him her fear. He listened. Then he said something simple. That love did not demand disappearance. That walking away from truth was the only real loss. The next morning, they faced uncertainty together, not hand in hand for show, but side by side in purpose. The conflict passed slowly, through patience rather than force, and when it did, trust grew stronger. Years later, people would speak of that time not as a romance, but as a turning point. They would say, Prince learned to listen. They would say a woman once overlooked showed what quiet courage looked like, and some would smile, remembering how love had arrived, not with magic, but with honesty. The girl once called a Beetle never became royalty in the way stories often tell. She became herself, and the prince did not lose his crown. He finally earned it. Under the same open sky, two lives continued, not perfect, not easy, but true. And that truth carried them forward. Peace, once earned, must still be protected. That truth revealed itself slowly. Life beside the prince continued with steady rhythm. Days were filled with listening, planning, traveling, and learning. There were no grand celebrations, no loud displays of love. What they shared was quieter, deeper, and far more difficult to break. The young woman had learned that standing in the light meant casting a shadow. As more people admired her strength, others searched for cracks. They waited for her to fail. Sometimes she felt their eyes even when no one spoke. The prince saw it too. He knew the greatest battles were rarely loud. They were fought in patience, in choice. In staying soft in a hard world, during one visit to a distant settlement, unrest surfaced. Supplies had not arrived on time. Anger filled the air. People were tired of promises. The crowd gathered, voices rising. The prince stepped forward first, calm but firm. He spoke with truth, acknowledging failure instead of hiding it. But honesty did not ease every heart. Tension grew. A stone was thrown. It missed him, but the message was clear. Before guards could react, the young woman stepped forward beside him. She did not shout. She did not accuse. She reminded the crowd she had once stood where they stood, hungry, overlooked, unheard. Her words were simple. "I know what it feels like when no one comes," she said. Silence followed. Her calm did what force could not. Anger softened. Hands lowered. That day, the prince understood something deeply. Leadership was not only about speaking. Sometimes it was about knowing when to stand beside a voice, shaped by hardship. Yet not everyone welcomed what they represented. Back at the palace, pressure returned in sharper forms. Critics questioned decisions openly now. They said compassion slowed progress. That understanding bred weakness. One night, a choice had to be made, one that would reshape the future. A proposal arrived from powerful voices. If the prince wished to secure long-term peace, certain traditions must be honored. Certain relationships set aside. The message was clear. That night, he did not sleep. He watched her as she rested, unaware of the weight pressing against the world they had built. For the first time, fear touched him, not of loss, but of choosing wrongly. At dawn, he told her everything. He braced for pain instead. She listened. She told him that love had taught her strength, not dependence. That if he chose path over person, she would survive. She always had. Her courage only made the struggle harder. In the end, he made his choice publicly. He chose truth, not rebellion. Not pride, truth. He explained his vision plainly. A world where leadership did not demand sacrifice of the innocent. Where worth was not inherited but earned. Some walked away that day. Others stayed. Change never comes all at once. In the weeks that followed, life tested them again, in smaller ways. Cold looks. Closed doors. Subtle resistance, but also quiet support, Anne. Old servants smiled at her when no one else did. A worker spoke up. During a meeting when they never would have before, these moments mattered. She continued her work among the people, not as a symbol, but as herself. She laughed more now, slept easier. The weight she carried for years had finally lightened. One evening, beyond the palace walls, they stood watching the sun sink low. She spoke of the girl she once was, the one who believed survival was the highest dream. He spoke of the boy he once was, the one taught that love. Distracted from duty, they smiled at how wrong both lessons had been. Years might pass. Challenges would return. But what they had built stood strong because it was honest, not a fairy tale, a partnership. And in that truth, the story did not end. It continued.